Now, welcome into the latest edition of the Pump Fake, everybody. Great to be with you as always, and thank you so much for making us part of your day. Jared Bailey with you. Joined today by my friend John Hendricks, getting ready to preview the NFC South. How are you, my friend? It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm doing well, just kind of taking it day by day down here in South Louisiana and just counting down the days until Saints training camp and going to be retreating to some much better weather in Southern California. So I'm looking forward to that.
I feel like the Saints are. I'm trying to think of like other teams around the league who dislocate from the home state so far for training camp. I know the Saints are one. I think usually teams stay pretty local, but we were talking about it in the lobby with that Louisiana heat in July, that very much warranted.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's not something that you really get used to. And, I remember during minicamp OTAs, it's in June, it's still hot down here. I mean, players, they're just like, sometimes you just feel for them because I always ask them, like, they got those helmet guardian caps on. And I'm like, doesn't that make it hotter? And they're like, not really. I guess you get used to it. But, it's still, you got them in dark jerseys one day, like the offense in dark jerseys one day, and then the defense in dark jerseys the next. And it's just, you see people get heat exhaustion, cramps, all that stuff that's going on. And so, man, it's good because they're just doing renovations over at the facility. That's why they're picking up operations. I know like Cowboys, they do it in Oxnard out there all the time. And so some teams move away, but it's the first time they've done it since 2016 when they were in Greenbrier and all that fun curse story, if fans understand that.
Well, going through the NFC South, it is I don't know how to put this nicely. It's kind of boring, I guess. And we'll start with your New Orleans Saints because I've been pretty harsh towards them this offseason. Doing my NFL head coaching rankings, I put Dennis Allen last. Going through the team tiers and whatnot, they were probably in my last tier. Like, to me, they're just a very boring team, John Hendricks. And I've said it a lot this offseason. Just like, I just cannot be bothered to care about the New Orleans Saints. Make me care about the Saints. Talk me off the ledge of, I just can't do it.
Well, I mean, it's tough. And I'll tell you, the NFC South is probably like mac and cheese without anything on it. You know what I'm saying? Like no good cheese sauce. It's like generic store mac and cheese. If you ever get that, the powdery kind, it just doesn't taste that good. But anyways, I digress. But, for the Saints, look, I'm with you because they should have skeptics. They should have critics, and nobody's going to be seeing them as a favorable team, right? Now, I still think on this division, the Bucs are top dog, right? I know Atlanta's made some moves that they've gotten better, and then people are looking at them in second. But, I'd probably put the Saints there, and, of course, Carolina's dead last. I mean, I don't see them ever coming out of that pit for a while. I mean, I get it. They've tried. They're doing some things, but, it just doesn't seem like it's in the cards for them. But, for the Saints, Dennis Allen is under a lot of pressure. He's under a lot of scrutiny, deservedly so, because this is a team that's 3 years removed from the postseason. I mean, you've seen the struggles on the offensive side. This is a team that went from Drew Brees to, Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston. They had Ian Book in there because of the COVID stuff. Taysom Hill, they tried. And you get Derek Carr last year. Everything was supposed to be really good. You know what I mean? And so it just didn't end up being in that way. And it was just a tough thing to watch. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's just been tough to sit through for the past several seasons, knowing these guys personally and knowing them in the locker room and knowing what this defense does for this team. Because if they didn't have a defense, they'd probably be a 4 or 5 win team. Like, I mean, that's just that bad. You know what I'm saying? If we're lucky. But, aside all that, what they've done in the offseason, obviously they made changes. And I remember when Sean Payton was stuck in a similar mediocrity of 7-9, 7-9, 7-9. He got rid of his closest coaches. He got rid of like Bill Johnson, Joe Vitt. He got rid of guys that had worked with him a long time. And I think that was the biggest difference for him, is that he just got out of the comfort zone and saying, okay, we're just not going to do this again. And he brought in new blood. Lo and behold, 2017, they got the draft right. All those things happened. Now, I won't say this is lightning strike twice for the Saints because, again, they got a hard schedule. They got a lot of things coming out of the gate. They got Dallas week 2. They got Philly week 3. I mean, aside Carolina in first week, they could be at 1-2 to start the year, and then they could find themselves in a hole even more. But they moved on from Pete Carmichael. they got rid of basically every offensive line coach holdover or offensive coach holdover, with the exception of Clancy Barone. And that's by design because of his ties with this Clint Kubiak system that they're trying to employ. Now, I'll tell you that he's come in here. It's no nonsense, right? He's all business. He's made a strong impression on all of us and on the media that covers this team. You see more on purpose on the field. You see a lot more direction, a lot more emotion, a lot more of just the things that we're just not accustomed to seeing, right? And so this offense is catered in a way where it benefits Derek Carr. It's more the play action pass. It's more the wide zone runs. It's more the outside zones. It's more motion, more play action, all those types of things that can help throw the defense off. Now, a lot of it hinges on the offensive line, which is a big question mark. I think it's the biggest question mark the Saints have, but they have an opportunity here to be better than mediocre, right? I think the 9 wins is where they can get. For me, I'm with you. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm in a thing. Show me, right? You got to beat a good team, because you look at their wins last year. I mean, they won some games, but they couldn't beat the hard teams. They couldn't beat the good teams. They got blown up by the Rams. They let the Packers come back on them in that fourth quarter. I mean, there was just so many things that happened, and they get one more win in this division. They're NFC South champions. I mean, you get to 10, you pretty much guarantee yourself this division right now. And I got to tell you, it's tough to really convince you that, you can care about the Saints, because they're a team that has repeatedly in the past few years just disappointed, right? You have the expectations on them. You see semblances of them. They start this pattern where they're like, not doing so hot. Then they start trying to pull it together. Then they start getting in the slump. And then when the back's against the wall, they come out fighting, but it's too little too late. So tough to convince people to be high on the Saints. I personally think that they can be pretty good, but I'm also going into this thing saying they got to show people and they got to show fans.
I have a YouTube comment that actually kind of alludes to what I was about to say. It seemed like Derek Carr and Chris Olave weren't on the same page a lot last year. You look at Derek Carr's stat line last year, 25 touchdowns to 8 picks. And from just a raw numbers perspective, you can look at it and say, okay, Derek Carr did well. That wasn't, in my opinion, emblematic of what showed up on the field, though. You mentioned that Rams game. I think that was kind of the Saints season in a nutshell, where, okay, there's a few minutes left in the fourth quarter and you start, gearing things up and making it fun. But at that point, it was kind of too little too late. There seemed to be a lot of dysfunction offensively, and you mentioned bringing in Clint Kubiak and things of that nature for the offense. How much better can this offense be from a season ago, and what do we need to see from Derek Carr and Chris Olave, more so Derek Carr, I would say, in 2024 for them to be able to take that step forward?
I mean, when you're not particularly good, and I don't know if good, you're just not consistent, right? That's the thing that they've struggled with, is the consistency. And, for whatever reason, when the offense looks good, the defense doesn't look good. When the defense doesn't look good, the offense doesn't look good. And they're a team that just cannot afford to not play complementary football. They just don't have the luxury of saying, well, we're just going to Olay it, and this one, part just falls off the wayside and we could still win a game. It doesn't work for them that way, right? And so you look at Derek Carr, I don't think he's a guy that comes in here. And even when he signed with the Saints last year, I told people he didn't have to be a top 10 quarterback. I didn't think he had to be an elite quarterback. He just needed to be a top half of the league type of guy that is able to manage the game accordingly and feed off the defense, because that's kind of been their bread and butter for so long. And it's obviously different because the years Drew were here, the Saints defense didn't really do that well. You know what I mean? They were statistically horrible in a lot of areas. They had some moments. And then 2017, 2016, I'd even go back to, is when things kind of changed for them and they became more of a balanced team. But, looking at Derek Carr, obviously he's a huge focal point here. And I think this offense is going to cater better towards him. He got a lot of input. He was able to put in a lot of input for this particular offense. He leaned on his brother David, and because this is a Gary Kubiak style offense, not necessarily It's Shanahan, like it's a hybrid, if you will, but it's a lot of the Gary Kubiak makeup that they ran with the Texans. So he got a lot of David's input. He loved what he had to hear. And you saw the quarterback in those last 6-7 games that benefited from the play action pass and more of the motion, things that they should have been doing from the start, right? And it was going to lead to him taking less hits. I see the thing about Chris Olave. You're right. They weren't on the same page for a lot. That happened earlier in the year. You saw a lot of miscommunication, off target, off the mark, a whole bunch of that. But what I will say is one thing to pick up on OTAs and minicamp. It was just one little route, and I get it. It's like it's practice. We're talking about practice, right? Allen Iverson, but you see him miss Olave on an outside on an out. He goes immediately up to him. He's like, dude, that's my bad ball on my part. And it didn't matter whether Olave ran it right or Derek just threw it off target. He was easily going up there and made it a point to say, that's my bad ball. I can do better. Right. And I think that's the difference, is that last year was a very big learning experience for Derek Carr. I know he's got a lot of fight in him. He battled through injuries. Shouldn't have been playing in some of these games that he played in, but he did. And so, again, he's a tough competitor. I won't deny that, but he's somebody that can benefit from this Kubiak offense and be better. But I do think and know that they want to be a run first team here.
Defensively, this is an aging unit where, you look at all the top stars. I mean, they're in their mid 30s for the most part. Whether it's Mario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, Cam Jordan, like these are, it's a unit with a foundation that is aging. Talk me into some other pieces on the defense that are up and coming and can eventually take the places of these veterans.
Yeah, look, and I think if you look at the offseason the Saints had, they were able to rework those three guys in their contracts and stuff. So they basically, and again, this is me just drawing the line, they got a 2-year window that they're trying to work with here, right? Because they've got this year and next season with DeMario, with Cam, with Tyrann. And so that next evolution has to happen. You got to get the next guys in, because I'm not saying they're going to retire, because DeMario's proven at ages number, he's still one of the top linebackers in this league. Cam, he battled through some injuries. Tyrann, I thought, had a really strong season last year. It was a good turnover machine. I think he's definitely proven that he can still play a lot of good ball. But you look at the guys behind him. I mean, if you're looking at the Saints defense, outside of that, you don't probably know too many people, right? I mean, you look at a guy like Paulson Adebo. Last year he was top 3 in the league in passes defended with 14.
Very slept on cornerback.
He had 19. Let me not discredit him. Alontae Taylor had 14. He was tied for 9th. He had 14 as well in first year in the slot. But Paulson Adebo is in a contract year. Very underrated corner. They did a great job in mending the fences with Marshawn Lattimore. He's coming back. He's very dialed in. He's ready to go. He's focused, because his big motivation is nobody's talking about me anymore. And I'm going to show people why I'm an elite corner. And so, again, 2 bad seasons in a row where he gets hurt because of friendly fire, that's tough, right? I mean, that's leaves you sour grapes. And then, you saw how everything went down with Michael Thomas, and that obviously, made an impression or impact in their relationship between him and the organization. But, their secondary is good in that aspect. Now, on the back end with Tyrann, they got this second-year guy, Jordan Howden, their safety out of Minnesota that they got. I don't think he's going to start immediately, but they do have a vision for him to run more in the box and play their dime back defense, a defensive back. And obviously they have Jonathan Abram, former first rounder, which he's a fantastic story. I mean, this is a guy that is former first rounder, didn't really work out with the Raiders as much. He came over to New Orleans last year, started in practice squad, was real humble. He's the guy that put in the most film work in the tablets and stuff. He got his opportunities. He played really good ball. And then the Saints brought him back for another year. And I think he's probably going to be the guy that starts with Tyrann. And so, look, from a secondary perspective, I don't see that falling off. I think it's only going to be better, especially because they added Kool-Aid McKinstry to the draft, their second pick. He's going to be phenomenal. Every coach I've talked to, this guy is a technician. He's a very big student of the game, and the coaches just absolutely love him. And so I think he's going to make a big impact there. You look at the linebacking core. Look, DeMario is DeMario, right? When you have him on the field, you got a chance to win, no matter what. And Pete Werner, the biggest knocks for him is that he struggles a bit in coverage. We've seen that in camp. We saw it last year. I still think he's a strong player and does a lot defensively. They went out and got Willie Gay Jr., somebody who's going to play a lot for this team. He's obviously got to earn it, but he's such a ball energy. He's very good against mobile quarterbacks. One of the reasons why the Saints brought him on board. He's somebody to keep an eye on. I like Khalid Hudson, the guy they got from Washington, who didn't really get to play until the late part of the season, and Washington found out what they had in him. And then they're like, oh, let's keep this guy. And it's kind of too late then. And then it really lies on the front four, right? I think on both sides of the ball is where New Orleans has to answer the questions. Is their offensive line is got a lot of question marks, but the defensive line too. And Cam Jordan, I don't expect him to get as much of a workload as he has in past years. Carl Granderson, he had 8.5 sacks last year. I think he can push the double digits this year. He's definitely their leading guy when it comes to getting after the quarterback. They added Chase Young. He had neck surgery the day after that they signed him. It was by design. They knew what they were getting into with him. All the reports are positive. He should be a go for training camp. He's very focused, very energized. I don't want to say he's going to be the great player, it's because you saw film in San Francisco, Washington, where it kind of looked like maybe the effort was a little bit questionable. But look, he's got the right attitude, the right demeanor, and he's come in here really like he's ready to go. He wants to work, and I expect him to make a big impact on this defense. And then on the interior, you look, they got Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, guys that aren't really household names, but Colin Saunders won Super Bowls with the Chiefs. He's a good part of their run-stopping defense. And then second year, Brian Brzee, look, he was great. As much flack as the Saints take on their first-rounders that they miss, this is one they hit on. He was everything as advertised and more, and he's only going to get better this season. And so I expect him to take another leap. But I mean, it's not a lot of household names, and it's a lot of players that people probably look at and like, who are these guys? Like Major League is who these guys, but they have the potential to step into bigger roles and be better in those aspects when they do move on, or when Cam and Tyron and Demario do decide to move on.
All the noise in the NFC South has been focused on the Atlanta Falcons, obviously bringing in Kirk Cousins and then saying, well, what's one quarterback when you can have two, and then drafting Michael Penix, surprising everybody. Despite how odd and poorly they handled the draft, you look at what they have right now, and they're currently my pick to win the division. I think that defensively last year, this is a team that was top 10 in success rate. I love Jesse Bates. And when you bring over someone like Kirk to go along with a Drake London, who has shown progression in each of his seasons, Kyle Pitts obviously very good, Bijan Robinson, it just felt like that they were a quarterback away. And bringing over Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson from the Rams, I think that that's only going to be good for Kirk, because it's going to be a similar system that he had in Minnesota under Kevin O'Connell. I love Atlanta. I think that they will win the division and host a playoff game in that building for, I believe, the first time since they moved into the new stadium. What are your thoughts overall, though, on the Falcons roster? And you brought up at the start of the show that you still feel like this is the Bucs division. So where are you falling with the Falcons?
I think the Falcons are still going to contend, right? I just don't think you can put them away and ignore the noise. You know what I'm saying? Is the fact that on paper it does look good. They lost Ryan Nielsen, their defensive coordinator, but you get Raheem Morris, which is extremely very well respected coach, and so I would expect him to pick up on the defensive, obviously, and I think that's my question mark is can Atlanta's defense replicate what they did the previous season to help keep them in it, because they were better a little bit defensively. I think for them, they need somebody who can manage the game. I think that's been the Falcons' biggest problem, and getting a guy like a Kirk Cousins, assuming he's healthy, because I think a lot of their success is going to hinge on where he's at in the process and such, and how he's going to be able to perform on the field. But on paper, I think that they have a chance to be there. It's crazy because you look at it, how the NFC stacks out. You could be 9-8 and then 8-9 teams and stuff, or you could have one that's a 10-7 maybe. But I think Atlanta's going to play in that 7, 8, 9 win range for sure. They could be second when it's all said and done. They could win the division possibly, but they're a team, I think, like the Saints, that they got to show and they got to prove other people that they're not past Atlanta, because there's some games that they've just absolutely blown because of poor game management, poor, clock management, coaching, whatever the case may be. And that's always the thing, is you trust Atlanta, just like you trust New Orleans sometimes, that, they'll slip the rug right out in front under you. It's just because things happen. But I think Atlanta's a team that people probably will sleep on a little bit. I expect them to be better, but again, I still got to go with the Bucs just because of what they've been able to do. No matter what, they kept Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans. I mean, that's big for them, and that's a big chunk of what they do. And Levante David is also like DeMario. This guy probably play for the next 10 years if they'd let him.
The thing with the Bucs for me, though, and credit to Baker Mayfield for earning a big payday. I do wonder how big a loss Dave Canales is going to be for them offensively. Happy that they kept Mike Evans around. I mean, that's a guy who's earned every dollar that they're giving him. And you look at like all the receivers that they have. It's not just Evans, but obviously Chris Godwin, who's going into his final year, his final contract year. They draft Jalen McMillan out of Washington. They have Trey Palmer, who they drafted last year out of Nebraska. So I mean, they go legitimately, 4 guys deep in their receiving room. I'm just, like I said, losing Dave Canales. I think that is going to be something that we pay attention to, in preseason to see, okay, with the limited reps that we do see them, how does the offense look? And then early on in the season, if there's any issues with Canales gone, that would be one of my bigger drawbacks with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I think I'd look at their offensive line too. I think that's a big thing for me is you got to have the offensive line to make a lot of things work. And of course, every team is like that. And it's just for me, the Bucs have to keep the thing going with the protecting Mayfield and letting him do his thing and, open up a little bit of the running lanes and such. But again, you look at the moves that do get made sometimes, like the Canales move. You can say that it doesn't affect the team, but in reality, it probably is going to hurt them a little bit. And so, again, I think the way it stacks out for them, there were a team last year that nobody really had expectations for. They weren't supposed to be that good, right? I mean, it's just nobody thought, but they were well coached. They had a lot of things that were going for them there. And I think that's what they still have is some pretty good coaching there that helps them stay, and they do the things necessary to be able to put themselves in a position to win. And they can win some of these games that, that the Saints and the Falcons probably can't in some aspects. And so I would expect them to be a team that goes under a microscope. And, you mentioned Chris Godwin, some of the contract players, that this could be kind of their final year window before something may have to change or something in their personnel or in some of their players and such, and keeping this nucleus together. But, they're, again, I just can't pick against them right now because I think that they've proven every year that just don't go against them because they just somehow find a way to win this division that nobody seems to want to win.
Very true. The Panthers are, I mean, I don't know, man. Like that's a long project. It's not going to be a 1-year thing. I do like the hire of Canales, who we just talked about in Tampa Bay. I think it will be good for Bryce Young just having one voice in his ear, having one cook in the kitchen, rather than a bunch of different guys, which was the thought process last year. Is okay, we'll bring in Frank Reich, we'll bring in Thomas Brown, we'll bring in Josh McCown, all these guys who we think could specialize in offense and help him out, and it really blew up in their face. It's going to be a long project. I don't expect it to be instantaneous, but trading for Deontay Johnson, drafting Xavier Legette, while still having Adam Thielen. I mean, he has much better targets than he had a season ago, does Bryce Young. I think it's, they also bring over Shaq Mason as well, who they paid for Robert Hunt up front. My apologies. So offensive line got a little bit better. Need to see something out of Ike Ekwonu, who had a little bit of a down year a season ago, but they're taking steps in the right direction. But this is going to be a long journey, going from 2-15 to eventually a team that can, contend for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I just don't see playoffs in their future at all. I mean, they can improve year over year, maybe get to 4 to 6 wins or something like that, be better. But to ask this astronomical turnaround for them to go where they need to go and want to go in this particular division, it's just hard to see. And again, There were a team that I just remember a few years ago in Matt Rule, like then the Stephon Gilmore stuff and them going all in and just making these bad moves and some of the things. And look, moving on from Brian Burns, that's going to hurt them a lot. You know what I mean? Brian Burns is a big deal for them and stuff. And so I think they're going to feel that a good bit for this particular, locker room and stuff and such. But, it all hinges a lot on Bryce Young. I think most of them, we talk about offensive line, but ultimately the quarterback wins games, they lose games. It's all their fault or it's not their fault. I mean, that's just how it rolls across the NFL these days. And, Bryce Young has to play better. He has to be better. I love Xavier Legette. I wish the Saints would have got him, but I didn't think that they were going that route. And obviously he got taken before they were able to pick. But, I like the concept of some of the future building blocks that they have, but this is just not their year. This is not their year where anybody should have any expectations for them. And You saw the disinterest last year when, you practically would have to pay somebody to just go into their stadium.
Right.
It's unfortunate because it's a beautiful stadium and it's a nicely located area and stuff, but tough times ahead, and they got to figure it out because it feels like they've kind of been in this rebuild mode for a few years now, and they've got to produce something at some point.
And it feels like they've usually had something that you would think they would be excited about. Obviously, drafting J.C. Horn a few years ago, and then, like you said, bringing in Stephon Gilmore. You look at the secondary, it's like, okay, this is something to go off of. Brian Burns is good. Derek Brown. Last year, taking Bryce Young, and then things just always seem to find a way to not go their way. The owners throwing water on fans in Jacksonville, like, oh my goodness, like I want this to work out for Carolina just because, you don't want to see a team can, always go, 3-14, 2-15, whatever it may be. I do think that, talking to JP Acosta about this, I think he made a really good point. If they can Dolphins eyes this offense where, they get Bryce Young in 3-step drops, quick releases, timing type situations on offense, I think that would serve him much better. And I think they have the personnel now to do it with Leggett and Deontay Johnson to where that they can make something like that work.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they're another team, the offensive line. You just got to see how that plays out. I think it's just such a focal point in today's NFL. If you can't protect, if you can't run the ball, you can't do the things. I mean, you saw last year just some of how bad their offense was. I mean, struggling just to get 50 yards, before the first half or something. I mean, that's tough in today's NFL when you can't even do that. And just shows you, I'm with you. I think the NFL should be more balanced. Like, it's great to see the Chiefs do their thing or the Bills do their thing, but at some point, some of these other teams got to come to the table. You got to see some resurgence in some of these teams that, were once on top dog, if you will. And same thing with the NFC. I mean, I think it should all become full circle, and you should never have one team that's probably just dominates every single year in some aspects, just because, I mean, it's great for ratings and it's great if a fan, but you want to see teams like Tennessee on the rebound or a Baltimore get more, or a Los Angeles Chargers come back and make it work. It's just for the Panthers, though, they've just got a lot to figure out here, and they could shock people. I mean, they could do a few different things here. I just don't see it as a playoff material. And maybe next year, if they can build off of this, make sure that Bryce Young's their quarterback of the future, if you will, and commit to him, because look, this is a league too that doesn't care about rookie quarterbacks, right? Or, if you don't get it within the first couple of years, you're gone. And so we've seen that plenty. And Bryce Young, if he doesn't do it this year, they may be drafting a quarterback when it's all said and done next season.
Absolutely. In terms of how I see this division playing out this year, 1 through 4, as of right now, July 9th, Falcons, Bucks, Saints, Panthers. What is your order in terms of how the NFC South will shape out?
I mean, Panthers they got to be at 4. I mean, nobody can pick higher than that. I would just say, again, I think it's Bucks. I think it's the Saints, just because I think that they can get their act together. Is it going to be good enough for a wild card? I'm not sure. And then I'd pick the Falcons. I think that the Falcons and Saints are kind of being that, like, close in record, but a tiebreaker might put the Saints over just because, you know what I mean? I think that's the type of situation that you're looking at. But the Panthers obviously dead last. I just think that the Bucks are still the top dog. I want to see how this Falcons offense does come together. And look, everybody's got to remember, what you do in the first several weeks doesn't matter, right? Like, you could look fantastic, and then, your whole entire season just goes into the toilet because of just, is a bag of fool's gold. We've seen teams do that over the years. Just start hot, and then you find out what the real team is. And so I'm interested to see how the Saints handle some of their big games early in the year. I'm interested to see how the Bucks do it, and the Falcons. But, everybody can agree that Carolina is not going to be there. But the Saints, they've got a lot to prove and a lot riding on this to be better this season. And honestly, it's playoffs or bust, or they got to figure out. I don't think they're going to blow this thing up. I don't think you're ever going to see them really go into a big full rebuild, but it's going to be interesting if they can't get into the playoffs this year, what Dennis Allen's future is going to be like and what the future of this team is going to be.
Oh man, you better hope that the Carolina Panthers don't have a 2008 Miami Dolphins-esque season when they went from 1 win to 11. Panthers fans
Well,
are
if you're better,
yeah,
if you're better and you put that bet in, man, you're gonna cash out a good bit. So if that happens, but
absolutely would.
see.
Yes. What have you got coming work-wise, and where can the people find you on all the social medias?
Yeah, man, it's so Ross Jackson and Locked On Saints and I formed a podcast called Second and Saints. That's our big thing right now, our baby. We kind of got up and running towards the end of February, March, and stuff, and so it's been growing. And we'll be out in training camp for at California for Saints. So we'll be going. Let's see, like August 23rd July 23rd to August 19th. And so we'll be out doing all the things. You can get all the written work at Saints News Network, si.com/NFL/Saints. And then follow me on Twitter. I'm not going to call it X. John J. Hendricks, just like Jimmy, not like the gin. And yeah, we just keep rocking and rolling. And if you follow me on game days and you're watching the game, I will spoil your game. So proceed with caution. You've been warned already on July 9th.
Ross Jackson, very good friend of this very program. So great stuff that you two are doing in the Saints neck of the woods. Appreciate you hopping on, buddy. In terms of me, debut piece for the Sporting News will be coming out, I believe, this week. So we'll hype that up once it is released. And then all the Black and Gold breakdown stuff on the YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, give it a review, give it 5 stars, give it 1,000,000 stars if you can. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. However you're tuning in, we'll see you next time on The Pump Fake. Take care.